Welcome to the channel. I have a pretty amazing guest. I have Ali here, and she has a very incredible story, and I think you're really going to resonate with it. So, Ali, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Ali, let's jump right into it.
Okay.
Tell me from the very beginning, how did all this start? What's your journey been like?
So I started to notice it around age 5 to 6. So that was the time where my older sibling actually got diagnosed with ADHD and a couple of the disorders. And it was just sort of a rough time for the whole family, really. And as soon as she was sort of diagnosed, because of that, it affected her quite a lot. She sort of gone off the rails a little bit, and unfortunately, because I was quite a timid, shy child at that point, I sort of took to it a lot, and there was times where there was a lot of sort of fear mongering unintentionally by her about, I don't know, let's say kidnappers or monsters. And at that age, really, you can imagine that's obviously quite a scary thing, sort of not understanding about them things at that time. So that's sort of where it all started. And then, so I haven't really ever had my dad around, which has never really been an issue for me at all or anything like that. And my mom had met a new partner, and we'd actually knew him. He was a family friend at the time, and she sort of introduced it slowly that they were in a relationship. And for us all, we were all, really happy about it because we got along with him really well. And, he did seem like a really great person, after knowing him for about 6 years. And as soon as we sort of knew that they were in a relationship, things did start to change. And at this point, my older sibling had moved out because, she was sort of like uncontrollable, and my mum couldn't really deal with it. So she had moved out at that point. So it was just me and my youngest sibling. And he started to sort of instill these rules and stuff. And, at that point, it's obviously normal. But there was quite a few times where he started to become quite verbally abusive, and sort of emotionally abusive as well. And for my mom at that time, she suffered anxiety and depression herself. And yeah, I found it really hard talking about it. And then I sort of developed like an eating disorder also that, the doctor diagnosed me from, because I wouldn't eat. And yeah, that sort of affected me quite a lot. So they stayed together for about 6 years. And sort of as time went on, things did get progressively worse, with like the sort of verbal abuse and emotional abuse and stuff like that. So I ended up moving to Oxford. So I was about 16 at this point. So I ended up moving to Oxford to train with professionals who travel internationally around the world, doing equine. So just like horse riding. And that point there, I was there for about a year, and that's when I noticed that my anxiety did begin to die down, because I was so busy, so wrapped up in, what I was doing, working 6 days a week, and stuff like that. I did realise that it did sort of start to go slowly because I had to just work through it. And that's when sort of Shaan's channel sort of like resonated with me, because as he says, just sort of accept and allow the symptoms. I sort of had to accept that that's how I was, and I had to just sort of get on with it. So that's when I actually come across your channel. That's when I sort of like started to notice that, okay, that sort of makes sense now, because for about a year or two after that, I didn't actually suffer that bad with anxiety. But then during this lockdown, that's when it hit me again. I'd say March 2020, that's when it sort of hit me again, and that's when I come across you.
What was were you ever diagnosed with anxiety growing up or anything like that, or?
Yes, yeah. So I did go through counselling, and I was diagnosed with it when I was growing up. But the counselling, that never really helped me. You know, it was just sort of like I could vent off to them. They could never really give me any advice back. Um, but yeah.
So it was kind of like talk therapy a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They call it cams over here.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So how what kind of symptoms were you experiencing where at the time you didn't know, but now you know it was anxiety?
Um, so the worst for me, I'd say, was the digestive and the intrusive thoughts. I remember one day being sat downstairs with my mom and her partner, um, the step that I was talking about. We were watching a movie. I think it had a bit of a violent scene in it. And then I had a thought pop into my head. You know, what if you harm someone like that one day? And I remember the panic that came over me because I was so shy, so timid, always cared about other people's feelings. You know, that thought scared the living daylights out of me. And I remember having to leave the room and, you know, go upstairs. And I remember the pacing and the rapid heartbeat, not being able to breathe and stuff like that. So I suffered with that for quite a while. I remember having the reoccurring thoughts of that for quite a few months, really, because I didn't understand what it was. I thought that, oh my God, like I'm going crazy. Like, why am I having these thoughts? And that was really terrifying for me. And then, sort of from then, you know, other thoughts would start to stem, and, you know, I just sort of didn't know how to control it. And then with the eating, um, I just, I just couldn't eat. I remember as a kid putting food to my mouth while I was at the dinner table. I remember going upstairs and going to the toilet and, you know, sort of getting rid of it that way because I couldn't stomach the food. And so that's then when I thought that I had an eating disorder. So they were probably the worst symptoms of digestive issues, sort of not being able to eat, and that constant pain that you have in your stomach. And then the intrusive thoughts, they were probably the worst, I'd say, for me.
Did you ever experience like depersonalization, derealization, or
Yes, no, yes, I did, yeah. But I didn't understand it at that time. I just thought, I felt quite, like you say, like a glass panel, like seeing the world quite weirdly. I did have that actually, but it wasn't that bad. Like I didn't really, it didn't scare me as much. I just thought it was normal because I'd suffered with it for so long, ever since a kid. I honestly just thought it was normal and that's how life was. Um, so yeah, that one wasn't really as scary, but
yeah.
I did definitely experience it for sure.
I had this crazy theory when it was wrong, but at the time it was really believable. So I had really bad digestive issues. So my what if thoughts were, what if there's something wrong with my digestion? And so I convinced myself that it was my digestion, the lack of absorbing, or there's something being seriously wrong, um, giving me derealization. Because I was Googling a lot and like I read like, there was more neurons and like and that's true, right? The enteric nervous system. And like, but I thought like my depersonalization, derealization, even my brain fog was coming from digest. It was such a weird,
Oh, okay.
it was like this weird theory that I was so convinced because I didn't want to focus on the fact that it was anxiety. Um,
Yeah.
and so how was your, how was your recovery journey like? Like, was understanding what was happening a huge part of it?
Oh, definitely, 100%. Like, obviously, like I said before, not knowing what was wrong with me and dealing with it for so many years purely because I didn't even understand it was anxiety at that point. So, you know, I did feel trapped in the cycle because I didn't realize that, you know, it was to do with the nervous system and, you know, the fight and flight response. Like, no one ever really, you know, told me that or anything. They just, you know, diagnosed me with anxiety at the age of, I'd say 12, 13. Um, oh, what was the question again? Sorry, bear with me.
Um, How
What helped? No. Oh, sorry, carry on.
how was your recovery journey? I'll get into how helps too. That's a good question.
Yeah.
But how was it? How
Yeah.
was your journey? How was it like as you were kind of recovering through this? Once you realized it was anxiety, how was that process?
Okay. So once I realised that it was anxiety, I did notice in the beginning that, with Sean's methods that, he had given on his YouTube and stuff, I started watching YouTube videos and stuff like that. At first, knowing that I just had to allow the symptoms to be there and, not take the thoughts seriously, I did find that my anxiety did, it did heighten a little bit. Which was quite scary at the time for me. But as I carried on with it, I did start to realise that the symptoms were becoming less and less over time. But the odd thing was that some symptoms that were really sort of scary for me, they would sort of disappear, but then new symptoms started to come,
Mm-hmm.
which I found quite strange. But I just start with it the exact same way. As you say, just accept and allow, and just sort of move on with your day. And then I sort of came to recovery, and I'd say I'm about 90 to 95% out of it. I do, have some symptoms there. If I'm quite stressed one day, I may have a couple racing thoughts and stuff like that, but I know how to deal with it now. So I just accept and allow, and then sort of carry on from there.
Yeah. How would what's kind of your advice to somebody who is going through this right now and feels like, they just have it so bad or they've had it for so long, did you ever, before I get into that, actually, how was, did you ever feel like you were like one of the only people to go through it and stuff like that? Like, how was that?
Yeah, 100%. Um, I honestly thought that I had the worst case out there because I remember having, I've had so many symptoms like existential anxiety, DPDR, intrusive thoughts, all of that. And I remember thinking, like, this isn't normal. Like, surely people don't go through this. Surely there's something wrong with me. Surely I've got some sort of crazy brain disorder or anything like that. Like, I remember feeling like I was the only one sort of feeling that way. But then I came across your Facebook group, and I actually realised that there's so many of the people who go for the exact same thing. But at the time, for sure, I did feel so alone. And also, like, when I remember, calling some helplines and stuff like that, and they don't, I didn't really get much like reassurance from them. Um, I remember not really getting much back off the people I would speak to, and especially like counselling and stuff like that. And then that really did sort of make me feel like I was, the only one sort of going through it. And so yeah, I definitely know how that feels for sure.
I remember I once went to the very first therapist I went to, and I thought it was so dumb I was going there too. I hate to say it, but it was just like because I was so convinced there was something physically wrong. And I felt like I was very good at convincing other people too. And like I felt like I convinced them. Like I convinced a therapist, no, there's something seriously wrong. Cause even he was just lost. He had no idea what I was talking about. And like yeah, he just was like, whoa, like, I don't know what's going on with you. And I'm like, see, why am I here? And he's like, I don't know, man. And it was just like this weird experience. And I had a lot of, therapists along the way. Um, I found some of the ones that knew, I found them actually towards the end. Um, and at that point, I didn't really need them, but I kind of had like similar experiences. And it was all just, I always just felt like, this was just had someone just explained it. If someone would have just told you.
Yeah.
And I felt like I don't know, man. And there's so many different opinions, and everyone thinks they're an expert, and like everyone thinks they're modality is the one, and it's just like we just want to get out. We don't really care which one it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you tell somebody who is in your shoes, who still thinks that, you know, they're the only ones going through this, who've struggled this long? Like, what would you tell that person? What would you tell old Allie or, you know, somebody else?
Just that you've got it so wrong. Like, the amount of people that, you know, do suffer with this, and, you know, who I've come across personally who actually have suffered with this, you know, due to your channel and your Facebook group. And just to know that you're not alone. You know, everyone does experience, you know, different symptoms and have worse symptoms that they deem as worse. But we all experience the same thing, and, you know, the severity is still the same for everyone. It's just because they have different symptoms that they find worse doesn't mean that, you know, what you're going through, you know, is any worse, if you understand. Did that make any sense?
No, 1000%. And for those people that are watching, Allie's actually in the mentorship. She's helping others. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have the mentorship structured that way, is to show that, like, you're not unique. Everyone
Yeah.
is going through it and everyone else is coming out of it. But even then, there's like this sense of, I always feel like anxiety makes you very myopic and very narcissist, like kind of like a narcissist. And I don't mean that in like a bad way, but it just feels like
No.
you have it worse. And
Yeah.
I feel like anxiety is great at catastrophizing. And so besides catastrophizing the symptoms, it catastrophizes your own anxiety.
Yeah, like, I remember having, you know, during like DPD and DPR, I remember like having thoughts of like, you know, am I real? And then, you know, is this world real? And, you know, just the thoughts that come with it and the dark conclusions that you get to with it as well. Oh my God, absolutely awful. But,
I
but you
totally
know, you have to realize, oh,
go ahead.
oh. Sorry, but you have to realize that it is all anxiety, and the whole, you know, the whole reason that we do get to these dark conclusions is purely because of the anxiety. And, you know, you're not going through anything crazy, you know, you don't have any crazy mental deformities or anything like that. It is purely just anxiety. They just have crazy symptoms. You know, during my recovery journey, I did have some very crazy symptoms that would just pop up, you know, along the way. And, you know, it is very peculiar, but, you know, it's just all anxiety. You throw it under the anxiety umbrella, and, you know, I managed to get out of it, and I don't have half of the symptoms, well, most of the symptoms that I had before. So it just proves that the things that you are feeling is anxiety.
Yeah. What were some of the really bizarre symptoms? Some of mine was that for some reason on my left eye, I could see like it was like a tint of blue, but it didn't happen on my right eye.
I had that as well. I honestly had that as well. I remember
Yeah,
watching the
I would do
TV
this.
one day. Yeah,
Yeah, I was.
watching TV. But honestly, so funny, and that was quite strange for me, to be honest. And I'd also have floaters, and
Mhm.
I'd be just say in bed looking at my phone, and I'd just sort of have like blue or sort of black dots just appear from nowhere. Constant ear ringing and ear popping. Um, Tingling in my hands and in my feet. Oh, just loads of bizarre symptoms.
I I once told my family that I felt like I was overheating. Like I was a
Yeah.
computer, like an iPhone, like a phone that gets really hot, and I feel like that. And they would look at me like, "What is he talking about?" My parents would literally look at me like really concerned. They're like, "Does he hear himself talk?" And but I was like, "No, no, no! Like guys, like feel how warm my hands are." And they're like, "Okay, it's warm," and I'm like, "That's not rude." And I just remember, and you know, like it's so funny. Um, Even now, even though I've there's so how many people are in the mentorship and like how many people have
Yeah.
been through it and how many people have now started coaching people from the mentorship and stuff. I still think till this day I was still the worst.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that. Even then, even though I've seen everybody
Yeah.
and I've still seen some wild stories, I was like, yeah, no, mine was still worse. Not that it's a competition, but I just feel like it. And I'm sure everybody does. Like that's how, even now, even though I've gotten out, and maybe that's why there's like this idea of, look, if I can come out, anybody can come out.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty wild. What other kind of bizarre symptoms did you have?
I mean, like you said, the overheating, I remember sort of being sat there over night time, finishing work, and then I would sort of have like this rush of heat. It would go from like my feet all the way up to like, my chest and my head. And it's really strange. I felt like the top of my head was like really hot for some reason. So strange. And it would be there for about half an hour to an hour. And I remember just sat there thinking like, oh my God, like what is this? Like what sort of, what is going on? What sort of like disorder do I have?
Yeah.
Awful, absolutely awful.
Um, I really commend you for like, joining the mentorship and um, just wanting to help others. Cause I think it's one of those things where, you know,
Yeah.
how is your experience with like kind of coming in, and how is your kind of attitude changed since going through this to reaching out to others?
Um, Sorry, say that again. Sorry.
I I guess I'll rephrase my question a little bit. Like, how has your experience been going through this now? Kind of coming out of it. Is it something that you're kind of glad that it happened, or that you learned a lot, or what's kind of been your interpretation of all this as you've, you know, where you're at the journey right now?
Yeah, so 100%. Like I say to my family members all the time, like, I'm actually so glad that I did go through this because, how life was before, sort of just trying to get by. And then now knowing that, I don't, that I don't have these symptoms anymore, I don't have these thoughts anymore, and just sort of having a new lease of life in a way. Because I remember before feeling like not feeling suicidal at all, but sort of feeling like, if I had a choice whether to live or not to, I'd rather not to at that point. And just knowing now that life is so much more exciting and I can do so much more things without, the anticipation. Yeah, I do feel amazing. And little things before, like getting on an aeroplane would, I'd always have multiple panic attacks. And now I know that if I did get on one, maybe I might be, a bit anxious, maybe at the start, but never as half as bad as I was before. And just knowing now that I can start new, try new things and help people as well, because I do remember, all of my family members have been through anxiety at some point or another. And just knowing now that, I can sort of help them, knowing that I've been through it, and as you said earlier, thinking that you was like the worst case out there, and knowing now that you're living life, as good as it can get. So, and also, helping you in the mentorship, just helping other people get through it is just so rewarding, and just giving them that reassurance that you can get through it, and this isn't going to be forever, and there is nothing wrong with you. You've just flicked a switch of the fight and flight response, and unfortunately you've had to deal with it. But I am glad that I went through it. I really am, because it's made me see life so much more beautifully, I guess.
It's well said. Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So everybody, if you're watching this video, if you really want to know more, if you want to kind of understand how recovery looks like, I'll put a link down below for essentially like a book, a report that kind of lays out the steps. And I'll also put a link down for applying for mentorship. Ali's working with me and my team, helping people get to full recovery. And we just take them by the hand and take them step by step. And it's a pretty incredible community. So you have to apply for it, and the link is down below. Fill out an application, and then following that, we just have a strategy session just to make sure it's a good fit. And yeah, with that said, Ali, I always commend people that share their story, because This may sound pretty ironic, but when I got out, I never wanted to talk about anxiety ever again. Isn't that weird? Like now that I do it all the time, I actually didn't want anyone to ever know I was going through this. I ever went through this.
Really?
Yeah, I never did. Cause I think, yeah, I don't know. So
Yeah,
I get very impressed when others do.
thank you.
Cool. With that said, I'll see you guys in the next video.